Then about a week later, we start hearing little bits of reports of what had happened to the Rasher family. Lawrence, Reverend Lawrence, or we call him Larry there, Larry Rasher, the one that you'd read about in the newspaper that was from Holland, Michigan area. Actually, we had met that family, maybe a month or so ahead of time before, when they had stayed in the guest house, and we were in the guest house too there at Centani after we first arrived in West Irian, and had gotten to know them a little bit. And they had 5 children with them then, 2 teenagers who about that time left to come here to the Philippines to go to the missionary kids school here in the Philippines, and one about 11 years old who would go to the school there at Centani, and 2 preschool kids. We'd seen them all, met them all, and just like a lot of other missionaries, we meet as they're passing through or staying when they stay in the guest house, you eat all together in one big dining room there at the guest house. So we sat at the table with them and gotten to know them a little bit for a couple of days. But then we start hearing these reports about their 2 children drowning, and them almost drowning down on the south coast of West Irian, way down in the swampland country where they were traveling by a big boat that they had built and were using for the mission. I don't know how much it was in the paper about it, how much you read about it. You in your letter said the paper said it was on the Malay Peninsula. Well, that's not called the Malay Peninsula. That's part of the island of New Guinea. It was on the south coast, and there's some of the missionaries we served with the MAF plane. In fact, they possibly would have taken that trip by plane, by float plane. However, the float plane pilot was sick with hepatitis and dengue fever both, and been going to be laid up for about a month. And a couple of the other pilots that are checked out on a float plane had been down on and off to fly, but not very regular. And we're real short on pilots there, with Martin having been killed, and then losing time on all of us searching for a couple of days, got behind on the flight schedule, and then with the float plane pilot sick and some of the other pilots' wives, and so in fact there were about 4 or 5 people that had hepatitis there during that time when we were there. So really were short-handed, so the plane wasn't available, so they decided to take this big boat of theirs, and that way they could make a few more stops and with the plane and so too. And normally they would travel interior, be from river to river and sort of stay inland, but it's a shortcut going around the outside around there, and if the weather's real good, they could get there faster by following the ocean. So they were out in the ocean, but then all of a sudden a real big storm came up and capsized the boat and dumped them all out, and they tried to hang on to the boat and hung on for several hours, but pretty soon a big wave knocked the little kids out of their arms, and they couldn't hang on to them any longer, the 2 little ones. The older boy that was with them, plus one native boy that was the helper that was with him, also hung on. And finally they came near an island, and they decided to try to swim for that. The older boy and the native boy were able to swim and get there, but the mother and the father, tried to hang on to things and swim, but they were completely exhausted, and they thought they were going to go too. But the Lord kept them alive and got them miraculously somehow to the shore. Then on the shore they had to go a long ways before they could go any place where there's any help or anything, and their legs and everything were all cut up from walking on the rough coral and things like that. Well, after this incident, the MAF went down and flew them back to Centani, where we were staying, and we got to know them quite a bit better after the incident, the parents and Chipper, the 11-year-old boy. In fact, they used our tape recorder to transcribe the report of the accident and so on. Got to know them quite well. We helped them with mailing of the reports and took some of the reports here to the Philippines, and we need to look up their 2 kids at Faith Academy here. We also arranged for them to talk to their kids by ham radio through Bert Brunemeyer here and through the ham radio there at Centani, so that they could talk to the kids and tell the kids about it. But we'll be having the teenage kids over for dinner one of these days and tell them a little bit about it and let them hear the recording we have of the memorial service. Now, this both happened pretty quick together, and because there was no funeral for either Martin Cayley or the 2 children, it was decided to have a combined memorial service there at the chapel at Centani. So we had that on a Wednesday afternoon on August the 4th. And I tape recorded the whole thing. We're going to let the older kids hear it. And also I thought you might like to hear part of it. This is a song a special song that was written by Jim Mellis. Jim Mellis is the son of the MAF president now, Charlie Mellis, and it's written in a modern style. I think Rick would enjoy hearing this too. And it tells about Martin Cayley, who Jim had gotten to know quite well because Jim is single, and the two single fellows sort of, hung around together and went out with the Indonesian, worked with the Indonesian young people, and so quite a bit there together. So I'll put that song on the tape here. The recording is not real good because I couldn't get too close with the microphone, but I'm sure you'll be able to hear it all right.
Another day went by today. I had a friend. He went away. The mirror stopped and told me why I'm lost and why I died. Another day went by today. I had a friend. He went away. The sun was set to live with us. He showed us how we should trust. Believe in me and you shall live and find a love that will forgive. In him we found much more than bread. Now what's the use? The sun is dead. The powers of darkness struck him down. They thought they'd won, killing the sun. The clouds of sorrow softly came to wash the earth with gentle rain. Lord, he's alive. The sun has broken through the clouds, and the clouds of death are ripped apart. The last great enemy is finally done. Oh, death, where's the victory in what you've won? You're a paper tiger. Now where's your power to hurt us? Sin was the thing that made you strong, and the law like a mirror condemned our wrong. But God now accepts us. Who is there to condemn us? Jesus died and arose for us, and now he reigns in power for us. So, death, when you strike us now, you will merely send us into the presence of the living God. So then, my brothers, we have nothing to fear. Work even harder for the kingdom near. You who have tasted know nothing God does is ever wasted.
Jim Mellis is the one singing the song and playing the guitar. Jim is out there at West Erie and doing the bookkeeping for MAF on a couple of year short-term, sort of a short-term basis. Well, we did have some chances then later on, a week or so later, to travel into the interior for a weekend, a little bit vacation, and a chance to see what things are like in the interior. Anita, of course, didn't get to go in with the search. I did get some idea what the people were like interior. The people at the mission station there where the search was organized from, they hadn't responded much at all to the gospel. They were still all carrying their bows and arrows and spears around and would fight each other at just almost anything. While Sunday afternoon, while we were there, when the weather was too bad to be searching, why they were hollering and chasing each other up and down the hill just above where the missionary's house is. And we found out later that, well, one of them had shot a couple arrows at his wife, and they were taking sides in the village, some on the wife's side and some on his, and starting a little fight. Not much came of it. I guess they stopped pretty quick, but it's a pretty wild bunch there. They're all around. When you come there with the airplane, they're down there looking in the airplane, looking you all over and laughing and smiling at you. You know, they're as curious to see us as we are to see them. We did get to go in together another weekend later. The first place we went in was a place called Wamana. This is in the Grand Balim Valley. If you read the book Cannibal Valley, you might want to read it again if you haven't read it recently. This tells about the valley of the Grand Balim. Well, Wamana is right in the main station in the center of that, where MAF has a plane base, and we spent the weekend there with the Charlesworths. They're one of the MAF pilots. They're actually from Australia, but they're working with us on West Irian side. And they took us all over to, actually I flew with them almost all day to about 10 different mission stations, and then Sunday afternoon they were invited to visit one of the stations for dinner. We had a great big turkey dinner, just like Thanksgiving. It was really big. Man, I guess the missionaries don't really have any hardships out there. This was way in the interior of West Irian in this Balim Valley. And we went along on this, and right next door to the mission's house was a native village, and they took us through to show us the native village. And so we took the tape recorder along, and they had the natives sing a little fun song for us, so I recorded that, and we'll give you a little bit of that. Okay, don't ask me to translate what they were singing because I can't. It wasn't a war song or anything. We were sitting right inside one of the long houses where the women do their cooking. Each woman had her own separate little fire. And there was a pile of coals and ashes all around us. It was kind of smoky and dark, but this was a Christian village. It was right there by the mission station. It was largely all Christians, and so they weren't warring anymore there. And the missionary said it's just a little fun song, sort of a ditty that they sing for fun, sometimes when they're out in the fields working or something like that. Well, it was real interesting to see what the missionaries are doing that were serving with the plane there in West Irian. MAF had 10 planes there, only 9 left now. The one that Martin was killed in was, of course, a complete loss, or nothing was saved out of it. And they fly, each pilot almost 100 hours a month. So they're flying just all the time. Of the 10 planes, 2 of them are big twin-engine Aero Commanders that do as much work as 3 of the single-engine Cessnas each one. However, they can't go every place just where there's larger airstrips. And in each plane there's 3 or 4 radios, and so I've repaired almost every one of those, and a lot of ground sets. So we really enjoyed getting in there for the weekend. And then later on, a couple weeks later, we got into one of the other bases, not in the same area, but in a different area, a place called Bokandini, where one of the MAF planes is based, and stayed with another one of the MAF pilots for a weekend. So we did get a chance to see some of the interior where most of the missionaries are working. Out there at Sentani, where we live most of the time, that's mainly the MAF base, and then the missionary school nearby were the missionary kids, and also sort of headquarters for a couple of the missions. They have houses and vacation houses and things there. It's not really where there's much mission work being done. Most of that's being done in the interior. Well, when we first went to West Syria, we thought maybe it'd only be a month or 6 weeks that we would be there, but there was so much radio work, they kept asking us to stay on longer and longer. And it finally dragged out so that we were gone for 3 whole months. We weren't quite in West Syria all the time because part of the time was spent traveling both ways, but finally, a week ago last Friday, we made arrangements to leave. Well, we went out the other direction through the Australian half of the island of New Guinea. You'll have to get out your maps to see what this is all about anyway. But going out the other way, Dave Hoisington, one of the MAF pilots, flew us out to Wewak on the Australian side with one of the Aero commanders. And there at Wewak is the main base of the Australian MAF, who operate on that side, on the Australian side of the island. And we stayed over the weekend there with them. I looked at a couple of radios for them too. I didn't do much because they didn't have much for test equipment or anything there. They don't have a radio man either. They have to send them down to Australia to get them fixed. So we got a chance to visit them and see what they're doing over the weekend there. And then on Monday morning, we flew by commercial, one of the Australian commercial airlines called Trans-Australia Airline, from Wewak over to Madang, which is still on the north coast of this eastern half of the island. This is all the farther we could get on airline, even though we had tickets all the way back to Manila. The airline was booked up over that weekend because of some big native show they have in the interior, and all the airline reservations were filled up, so we couldn't get reservations, so we just flew as far as Madang. But there at Madang was where the Lutheran Mission has a radio man, and also the Lutheran Mission operates some planes of their own, and they had one base there. So we met some of the guys of the Lutheran Mission, and one of the pilots was one that had gotten his training at MAF in Fullerton and knew quite a few of the guys. And I had a chance to talk to the Lutheran radio man there and see what they were doing. He was an American. And they arranged for us to fly with the Lutheran plane on the same day, on Monday, into the interior, into one of their stations at a place called Goroka in the interior. So we flew in with him that afternoon and then made arrangements to stay overnight at Goroka at the Lutheran guest house they have interior. Boy, there was really quite a contrast between this place and the interior West Syria. And the Australians have been working on this side, and things were really modern. The airstrip interior was 2 runways and really busy and plenty long, and all the nice paved streets on the town interior, and really quite nice. Really a lot more developed than the other side. The other side is really just all wild country yet. So we stayed overnight there at the Lutheran guest house, and then the next day with the Lutheran plane, we flew over just a little ways over to a place called Ukarampa, and this is where SIL, the Wycliffe Bible translators, have their main base. Well, we got a chance to visit SIL Aviation and radio setup. They got quite a radio setup, 3 full-time radio men, and they have about 90 radios, about the same number we have, but they are well staffed. They seem to be able to get enough radio men there. And we also did meet Mrs. Coyers, who writes in Missionary Monthly. She's with SIL translating the Bible there in West Syria, in New Guinea, the other half of the island. So her husband was not there. He was out at one of the other coastal cities that we weren't going through, but we did get to meet her. She was there with one of their kids, and we talked to her one evening. It was real interesting talking to her and seeing what they're doing. We hope if we ever go through there again, we'll be able to visit them at their station when they're in at their station where they work. From there, on Wednesday morning, we flew in the Lutheran plane. They have a twin-engine Aztec. We flew in with that down to Port Moresby, where we had reservations in the afternoon to fly up to Manila on Qantas Airlines. And there at Port Moresby, we also met MAF, has a plane based, and met the MAF family there and had lunch there. And then at 3 in the afternoon, the plane left for Manila on Qantas on the jet. And we got back. It actually took 5 hours for the flight, but it was 6 o'clock in Manila when we arrived back on Wednesday afternoon. Well, it was quite an interesting trip and a busy time, and we took a lot of pictures. When we get back on furlough, we'll be able to show you some of these. It's a little hard, but at least we give you some idea what we've been doing here on this tape. I guess that's all for now, and say goodbye to everybody, and expect we'll hear from you all again soon.